Elias Mercer had never expected to find himself standing in the middle of a palace floating in space, staring at an alien princess who had the entire galaxy's elegance built into her posture. The station was enormous, a metal and crystal wonder that orbited a star on the outer edge of the Aurelian system. Every surface gleamed, every corridor hummed with quiet energy, and humans were still considered charmingly awkward here, despite centuries of interstellar diplomacy. Elias, a linguist and cultural liaison, felt awkward enough for both species. He had been chosen for this posting not because he was the best diplomat, but because he understood words. He understood how sentences could carry danger, hope, or, in some rare cases, the deepest trust. The Aurelians, with their careful, measured culture, prized exact communication above all else. One slip of a phrase could mean alliance, insult, or even exile. Humans, by contrast, were unpredictable and messy, often speaking before they thought, and that unpredictability made them fascinating, if unreliable. Elias had been assigned to Princess Saikira's private chamber, a room that resembled a library more than a palace suite. Crystalline shelves held glowing scrolls and devices that Elias did not understand. The walls shifted colors, reflecting moods that he could barely comprehend. And in the middle of it all stood Saikira, her form elegant, almost translucent in the soft light, with eyes that seemed to see into every corner of his mind. She did not smile, not yet, but she did not frown either. She simply watched. "You will translate the ceremonial greetings tomorrow," Elias said carefully, trying not to let his nervousness show. "And I will assist with personal communication, as you requested." Saikira inclined her head slightly. Her voice was musical, yet precise. "Your human words are unpredictable. That is why I have chosen you."
"There was no judgment, only statement." Elias swallowed.
Being chosen could be a privilege or a sentence. Aurelians did not make mistakes lightly. He had spent months learning the subtle inflections of Aurelian speech, the pauses that carried meaning, and the silent gestures that conveyed volumes. Today, he was to practice something much more delicate, expressing personal sentiment in a way that was understandable but not offensive. Humans were known for blundering through emotional nuance. Aurelians were known for holding grudges longer than most stars existed. The combination was terrifying. "Princess, I have prepared translations for the greetings," Elias began, arranging the holographic scroll in front of him. "But there is something else. I want to try something." His hands trembled slightly, though he hated that she could notice. Somehow, she always did. Saikira's head tilted, a gesture that was almost imperceptible but loaded with curiosity.
"Explain!" Elias cleared his throat. "It is a human concept."
One that may not translate exactly into Aurelian culture, but it is important to us. Important to me. He paused, trying to form the words carefully, but as they spilled from his mouth, they carried more weight than he intended. I love you." The words landed like a pebble in still water, sending ripples across the quiet room. Elias immediately wished he could take them back. He had intended them as a simple statement, a gesture of honesty in human terms. But Aurelians did not interpret words lightly. To them, such a declaration was a commitment, a formal and binding expression that required certainty and proof. Humans often spoke of love casually, but here it could have consequences. Elias did not yet understand. For a long moment, Saikira did nothing. Elias could feel the hum of the palace intensify, a subtle vibration that seemed to echo through the air itself. He tried not to panic, tried not to analyze every tiny movement, every flicker in her eyes. And then, softly, she spoke. Finally. Elias froze. His brain scrambled. Finally. That was a response? A good response? A bad one? He had prepared for shock, disdain, outrage. but not relief? Admiration? Whatever it was, it left him momentarily speechless. The corners of her lips lifted, just slightly. A human might have called it a smile. Her voice, calm and soft, carried no judgment. Yet it carried more meaning than Elias could measure. I didn't mean... I didn't know, he began, stumbling over words in a way he never had in years of studying languages. I thought humans sometimes... His sentences crumpled like fragile paper under pressure. Saikira raised a hand, delicate but firm.
You need not explain. Humans speak before fully understanding themselves.
I have observed this. There was a pause, then she added, Your mistake is... Not a mistake. She sounded almost amused, though not exactly in the human sense of humor. It was something more subtle, an acknowledgement of difference, of bravery. Elias blinked, unsure if he should bow, retreat, or continue.
Bravery? He asked, his voice low. Yes, she said.
It takes courage to speak when the outcome is unknown. My people do not speak such words without certainty. You do not know certainty, yet you spoke anyway. That is admirable. Admirable. Elias had never been called that by anyone in his life. Not by teachers, not by colleagues, not even by friends. And now, it was coming from someone centuries older than humanity, whose culture measured time in millennia. The weight of that word pressed on him, but it was not heady. It was strange, exhilarating. For the rest of the session, Elias could not focus on translations. He tried desperately to keep his mind on ceremonial phrases, but every gesture, every glance from Saikira reminded him of the words he had said. I love you. They were heavy, strange, and somehow light, all at once. He realized that humans often feared these words because they implied obligation, vulnerability, or exposure. To Aurelians, exposure was a dangerous practice. Yet somehow, his words had bridged a gap, however small. Saikira walked to a window, her posture perfect, and gazed at the distant stars. Elias followed her gaze, understanding that she, too, was trying to translate his human emotions in her mind. I have watched humans for many cycles, she said quietly. You are unpredictable, reckless, and emotional. Yet, you survive. You adapt.
You connect. And now, in these words, you have chosen me.
Elias's heart thumped so hard he thought the palace could hear it. Chosen you, he asked. Yes, she said simply. Not for conquest, not for power, not for calculation. You chose. That is rare. She turned to look at him fully now, her eyes reflecting the light of distant suns. Tell me, human, why speak when you do not know the outcome? Elias swallowed. Why? The question had been part of him for years, not just here. Humans acted in uncertainty constantly, exploring unknown planets, negotiating with alien species, risking lives for ideas that might fail. Speaking love without certainty felt the same. Because sometimes, he said slowly, you have to act before understanding. Otherwise, you never act at all. Saikira considered this. Her expression was unreadable, yet Elias felt her thinking deeply. Humans measured value in action, while Aurelians measured in certainty. To bridge that was remarkable. Then you have shown me something, she said after a long pause. You have shown me courage, not based on knowledge, but on choice. That is fascinating. The session ended shortly after. Elias left her chamber with a mixture of relief and apprehension. He had survived the first declaration, but he knew it was only the beginning. The palace corridors felt narrower now, the polished walls reflecting not just his image, but the possibilities of consequence. He had spoken human truth in alien territory, and it had been received. That, in itself, was a triumph. Over the next few days, the palace hummed with subtle changes. The Aurelians observed him more closely, studying not just his words, but his mannerisms, the pauses in his speech, the natural hesitations humans could not hide. He caught glimpses of Saikira in halls, sometimes watching him silently, other times smiling faintly in ways that made his chest tighten. The galaxy was enormous, full of rules and structures humans had yet to understand. Yet here, in this palace, something simpler and more profound had taken root. Elias often replayed that first session in his mind, the fear of misunderstanding, the absurd hope that she would not judge him harshly, and the overwhelming realization that one careless phrase could mean everything or nothing. In that delicate balance, humans thrived. We speak, we risk, we connect. Sometimes we are wrong, but sometimes we are understood. And that understanding, fragile and new, was more powerful than any treaty, any technological advantage, or any political maneuver in the galaxy. It was, he realized, the very essence of why humans survived, and sometimes why they thrived. By the end of the first week, Elias knew he would never forget the sound of her voice, the weight of the single word she had said. Finally. It was not just relief, it was recognition, admiration, a spark that promised more than certainty could ever offer. And in a universe built on rules, measurements, and probabilities, that spark was dangerous, but also, undeniably, human. The days that followed Elias's accidental declaration were unlike anything he had experienced in his entire career. The palace of the Aurelian conquered was no longer just a building of crystal and light. It had become a living organism in his mind. Each corridor and chamber a reminder of his human boldness and the fragile bridge it had built with Princess Saikira. He walked through the halls with a new awareness. Every gesture, every glance, every word now carried weight. Aurelians observed carefully, and Elias felt it. Servants moved around him with silent precision. Holographic screens displayed messages he could barely read, and the ambient hum of energy that flowed through the station seemed attuned to him. He had always known humans were clumsy in comparison to other species, but here, his every imperfection was magnified. Yet, the most unusual thing was Saikira. She did not change in obvious ways. She remained elegant, poised, and careful in speech. But Elias noticed subtle differences. When she passed him in the halls, her eyes lingered a moment longer than they might have before. During meetings with advisors, she asked questions about human culture, questions that were not required for diplomacy, but clearly for understanding him. And sometimes, when he looked at her, he could almost see her thinking, trying to translate human unpredictability into her structured logic. It was during one of these quiet mornings, in a room that overlooked a distant pale blue planet, that Saikira invited him to walk with her. The space between them was filled with light and silence, the kind that made words both urgent and difficult.
You have made a disturbance among my people, she said softly.
Elias flinched at the word disturbance, unsure whether it was criticism or acknowledgement. I hope not, he replied, careful with his phrasing. I only spoke honestly. That is all humans can do. Saikira considered him. Honesty is rare among my people, but it is not always welcomed.
You have risked more than you realize.
A declaration of this kind can create complications. Elias nodded, feeling the weight of her words. Complications were exactly what he feared, though he had not expected her to be the one to warn him. I did not expect. Well, that you would understand. But you did, and I am grateful. She stopped walking and looked at him fully. The light from the planet behind her haloed her in a soft glow, making her appear almost ethereal. I understand more than you realize.
Your kind operates on choice and courage, But courage without understanding can appear reckless.
I know, he said, but sometimes understanding comes after action, not before. Humans, we survive because we leap, not because we measure. He paused, searching for the words. I cannot explain fully, but I promise I did not speak carelessly. Saikira smiled faintly, almost imperceptibly. And that is why I did not dismiss your words.
But your people! They are not my people. You will need to demonstrate the value of such recklessness.
Elias frowned, unsure what she meant. Demonstrate? Yes, she said, turning her gaze back to the distant planet. Your declaration has drawn attention. The Concord watches you now. Your behavior may influence how humans are perceived, not just by me, but by the entire system. You must show that your actions are sustainable. The word sustainable struck Elias as both simple and terrifying. To humans, emotional honesty was natural, sometimes messy but always authentic. To Aurelians, the same act could be scrutinized, debated, and judged as a model for their own culture. He realized that in speaking his truth, he had become more than a visitor. He was a symbol. Over the next several days, Elias noticed a shift. Advisors and officials approached him with cautious interest, asking questions about human customs, behaviors, and the way his people approached problem-solving. They asked how humans made decisions without certainty, how they trusted each other, how they formed relationships quickly and openly. It was as though every human instinct that Aurelians considered unpredictable was suddenly under examination. One afternoon, while Elias was examining a holographic chart of interstellar trade routes, a young Aurelian aide entered his chamber. She moved with careful grace, her gestures measured, but her eyes carried curiosity.
Human Mercer, she said formally. Princess Saikira has requested your presence.
Ooh. There is a matter requiring your input. Elias closed the chart and followed her, wondering what new challenge awaited. In the audience chamber, Saikira was seated with several senior advisors. The room was calm, yet the energy felt tense. Elias, Saikira said, there is a matter of diplomacy that concerns humans and Aurelians alike. A neighboring system has requested assistance in cultural exchange programs. They wish to learn from human adaptability. One of the advisors, a tall, angular figure with pale skin and multiple eyes, spoke next. Humans are admired for their courage and flexibility, but we have questions about their methods. Are they reliable? Can their emotional impulsiveness be trusted for interspecies agreements? Elias took a deep breath. This was precisely what he had feared, the judgment of an entire culture weighing down on him. I understand your concern, he said carefully. Humans can be unpredictable, but we adapt. We learn. We build connections, even when the path is uncertain. That is how we survive. That is how we succeed. Saikira nodded. Exactly. And that is what the Concord wishes to see demonstrated. Your actions, your conduct, and your choices in the coming exchange program will show whether humans can be trusted in these matters. It was a challenge, and Elias accepted it immediately. There was no room for hesitation. The reputation of his species and the fragile bond he had begun to form with Saikira depended on it. The exchange program involved teaching the neighboring system's diplomats human problem-solving methods. It required patience, ingenuity, and an understanding of human emotional intelligence, a skill many aliens could not comprehend. Elias was to guide them, show them how humans approached uncertainty, and prove that choice and courage could produce results superior to rigid calculation. He began the program with careful preparation. Using simulations, hypothetical scenarios, and human anecdotes, he demonstrated ways humans made decisions under pressure. The Aurelian observers were skeptical at first. Every mistake was noted, every hesitation scrutinized. Elias worried constantly, yet he pressed on, demonstrating both patience and flexibility. Saikira observed silently from a distance, her presence a steady reassurance. She did not intervene, but her attention reminded Elias of the delicate balance between human spontaneity and Aurelian expectation. One day, a scenario involved negotiating a resource dispute between two planets. The Aurelian observers expected humans to fail, to react emotionally and irrationally. Elias allowed the delegates to speak freely, intervening only when necessary. He guided them with questions rather than answers, encouraging them to trust their instincts. The result was remarkable. The delegates reached an agreement that satisfied all parties. It was not perfect by Aurelian standards, but it worked. They had acted without certainty, relied on empathy, and adapted as the situation evolved. The observers were silent at first, then slowly began to nod. Elias felt a quiet thrill. Humans had succeeded where logic alone might have failed. Saikira approached him later, her expression unreadable. "You have demonstrated much," she said softly.
"Not only your skills, but the strength of your people. They are
different, yet effective." Elias smiled, relieved, but also cautious. "I only did what humans do naturally. We adapt, we act, we connect." She considered his words carefully. "And yet that which is natural for you must be learned for us. You have offered a new perspective. The Concord will need time to fully understand it, but you have made a start." In the following weeks, the exchange program continued. Each day brought new challenges, misunderstandings, cultural clashes, and moments where Elias feared failure. But with each success, he saw the observers' perception of humans shift. They began to ask questions, not of skepticism, but of curiosity. They wanted to understand, to learn. Elias also began to notice subtle changes in Saikira's behavior. She smiled faintly, more often, lingered a little longer in conversation, and sometimes asked questions that had no immediate diplomatic purpose. Their connection, begun by a single accidental phrase, was growing quietly, unobserved by most, yet profound in its impact. One evening, after a particularly long day of simulations, Elias found himself walking beside Saikira again. The planet below was bathed in violet light, and the stars shimmered like scattered jewels. He realized that he no longer feared her judgment as much as he had initially. The challenge had taught him patience, strategy, and humility, but also that human courage and honesty could leave a mark, even in a culture built on certainty. "You have changed the way some in the Concord see humans," Saikira said quietly. "Not all, but some. That is significant." Elias looked at her, feeling the weight of the moment.
I never meant to change anything except maybe help them see humans as we are. Flawed, yes.
Messy sometimes, but capable.
She smiled faintly. "And you have succeeded."
Perhaps it is time to see how humans manage emotions beyond strategy. You have shown us method. Now, let us see the heart. The words hung in the air. Unspoken challenges and quiet promises entwined. Elias understood. The journey was far from over. The trials had begun, and the bridge between human and Aurelian understanding was still fragile. But he felt a quiet pride, a sense that even in a galaxy built on rules, humans had a place. Not because they followed the rules perfectly, but because they dared to act when certainty was impossible. That night, as he returned to his quarters, Elias reflected on the lessons of the past weeks: courage, choice, and connection. Human traits often overlooked or misunderstood were powerful tools. They had allowed him to survive scrutiny, build trust, and begin a bond with a princess whose culture was more precise and rigid than any he had ever known. He realized that the true challenge was only beginning. The Concord's scrutiny would intensify, the stakes would rise, and the tests would become more subtle. But Elias felt ready. Humans survived because they acted despite uncertainty. Now he would continue to act, not just for himself, but for all who shared his heritage. And somewhere in the quiet glow of the palace, he knew that Sayakira was watching, understanding, and perhaps hoping. The bridge had been built, but the real journey, one of trust, understanding, and courage, was only just beginning. The Concord had accepted Elias's demonstrations, but acceptance did not mean ease. He knew that while some Aurelians were beginning to appreciate human spontaneity, others were still skeptical. In their world, every word, every gesture, every action had purpose and consequence. Humans acted first and measured later. Aurelians measured first and only then acted. It was a fundamental difference, and Elias could feel the tension it created. Every day, the next challenge arrived quietly, almost imperceptibly. Sayakira had asked him to join her in the central observation hall, a circular chamber surrounded by glowing panels that displayed distant worlds. The floor pulsed faintly with energy, a reminder that the station itself was alive with the activity of countless systems. Elias followed her, unsure of what this visit might entail. "You have succeeded with demonstrations and simulations," she said as they walked. Her voice, calm and precise, carried the weight of authority. "Now you will face a test that cannot be measured in calculations or outcomes. You will demonstrate understanding, not method. Emotion, not logic." Elias felt a chill. He had expected trials of negotiation, diplomacy, or strategy, but emotion? Humans were emotional, yes, but Aurelians had a way of measuring and constraining it. How could he pass a test designed by a species that considered emotions dangerous if uncontrolled? Sayakira noticed his hesitation.
Do not be afraid. This is not punishment.
This is discovery. The Concord wishes to see the heart of a human, not the mind. They entered a chamber that seemed to float in the middle of a void, walls transparent, showing stars and distant planets. In the center was a device, sleek and circular, with glowing symbols that Elias could not read. Aurelians approached it with careful gestures, touching panels that hummed under their fingers. "This is an emotional simulator," Sayakira explained. "It does not harm, but it tests responses. It observes reactions, not knowledge. You will interact with scenarios that evoke feelings: loss, hope, fear, joy. You will respond naturally. Nothing more, nothing less." Elias swallowed. His human instincts told him to analyze, to plan, to strategize, but that was exactly what he must not do. He had to feel and let those feelings guide his responses. The first simulation activated. He found himself in a recreated scene of a human village. Children ran through fields, laughter echoing. The air smelled of fresh earth and rain. A sudden shadow passed overhead, and the sky darkened. A machine, an enormous harvesting drone, began malfunctioning, threatening the village. Elias reacted instinctively. He ran to guide the villagers to safety, moving quickly but calmly, giving instructions in human ways. The scene shifted as he acted. The villagers followed, cooperation emerged, and the danger passed. The simulation ended, leaving him breathless but unharmed. Sayakira watched, her expression unreadable. "You responded with instinct and empathy. That is promising."
The next scenario was different. It showed a small human community facing scarcity.
Crops had failed, water was limited, and fear filled the air. Elias felt a pang in his chest, the helplessness humans often experienced in times of crisis. He acted again, but this time with words, calming, encouraging, explaining solutions. He did not know if the simulation required success or failure. He only knew that humans survive by hope as much as by action. The Concord's monitors observed his every reaction, micro-expressions, subtle changes in tone, decisions made under pressure. Elias realized that this test was not about correctness. It was about authenticity, acting in a way that humans would act when nothing was guaranteed. Hours passed. Simulations shifted rapidly. Scenes of beauty, of isolation, of unexpected kindness, of sorrow. Elias moved through each, guided by instinct, guided by the principles humans had learned through millennia. Connection, choice, courage. He laughed when joy appeared. He hesitated when loss struck. He adapted when fear demanded innovation. Finally, the last scenario appeared. It was not a human scene this time, but a recreation of Aurelians, their history, their culture. He saw Saikira as a child, learning the precision and patience of her people. He saw her struggles to understand uncertainty, to trust emotions that were unmeasured and unruly. Elias's chest tightened. He felt a surge of respect and empathy, realizing that the princess's grace had been earned through years of disciplined growth. Without thinking, he spoke aloud, words that were human, unmeasured, but heartfelt. Your people fear chaos, but you have faced it with courage every day. You deserve acknowledgement for what you have endured and for the strength you have shown. Saikira's gaze met his. For the first time he saw emotion, not calculation, in her eyes. There was surprise, yes, but also understanding, recognition, appreciation.
The simulation ended. The room fell silent, filled only with the hum of the station.
Elias felt drained but exhilarated. He had acted as a human, fully, without trying to predict every reaction or consequence. Saikira approached him. You have passed the test not by technique, but by sincerity. Humans are unpredictable, yet capable of remarkable clarity in action. You have demonstrated what it means to act from the heart. Elias exhaled. Relief, gratitude, and pride washed over him. Thank you, he said simply. I did my best. And that, she said, her voice soft, is enough. The following days brought quiet but profound changes. Observers who had been skeptical now asked questions that showed curiosity rather than doubt. Discussions about human adaptability shifted from criticism to study. The Concord began to consider how emotional honesty might influence policy, diplomacy, and even interstellar cooperation. Elias noticed a subtle change in Saikira as well. She engaged with him in ways that were not strictly formal. She asked about human habits, favorite stories, even about emotions that humans felt, but Aurelians seldom expressed. Their conversations became longer, more personal, and less rigid. Elias felt that bridge between species widening, delicate but strong. One evening, as they walked through the palace corridors, the conversation turned to the galaxy itself. Stars, planets, and civilizations stretched endlessly before them, a tapestry of possibilities.
You have shown us a new way to see the galaxy, Saikira said quietly, not just with minds trained in logic, but with hearts open to chance.
It is valuable. Elias looked at her. We humans survive because we act even when we do not know the outcome. Sometimes it fails, sometimes it succeeds. But without action, nothing happens. That is what I wanted to show. Not just for your people, but for all who underestimate us. She nodded. And you have succeeded. You have revealed not only the nature of humans, but also a possibility for us. That courage and choice can coexist with calculation and precision. As they walked, Elias realized that the bond he had begun to form with Saikira was no longer accidental. It had been initiated by a single phrase, spoken without planning, yet it had grown into something meaningful. A connection based on respect, understanding, and shared discovery. The Concord would continue to observe, continue to test, and continue to judge. Elias knew this, but he also knew that humans had shown they were capable of more than the galaxy had expected. He felt a quiet satisfaction, a sense that humanity's unique strength, the willingness to act, to risk, to connect, was beginning to be recognized. In the following week, he was called to another demonstration, this time involving multiple species. Delegates from nearby systems arrived, curious to learn human methods for collaboration under uncertainty. Elias guided them, as before. But this time, the stakes felt higher. He was not just teaching humans adaptability. He was shaping perceptions across species. The simulations involved resource allocation, conflict resolution, and environmental challenges. Delegates often hesitated, uncertain how to act. Elias encouraged them to trust instinct, to communicate openly, and to act with empathy. Observers from the Concorde watched closely, recording, analyzing, and slowly nodding in appreciation. By the end of the sessions, Elias saw a change not just in the delegates, but in the Aurelians themselves. They asked questions about trust, about cooperation, about human courage. They began to consider that perhaps unpredictability could be a tool rather than a weakness. Sayakira watched silently from the side. When the sessions concluded, she approached him in private. "You have done more than survive scrutiny," she said.
You have altered perception. The Concorde is beginning to see humans in a new light, and you have done this without compromise or pretense.
That is remarkable. Elias felt a mixture of pride and humility. "I only acted as humans act," he said. "We face uncertainty every day. We make choices, connect with others, and hope for the best. That is all we have." She studied him for a long moment. "And that is enough." For the first time, Elias felt that the weight of expectation was lighter. He had faced tests, simulations, and scrutiny. And humans had endured. More than endured, they had impressed. He realized that their unpredictability, which the galaxy often dismissed, was in fact their greatest strength. As he returned to his quarters that evening, he reflected on the journey. Each challenge, each test, each simulation had been a lesson, not just for him, but for the Concorde. The galaxy had underestimated humanity, yet they had proven that courage, empathy, and choice were forces that could shape events beyond logic. And in the quiet moments when the palace lights dimmed and the stars stretched endlessly outside, he thought of Sayakira. Her presence, her curiosity, and her acknowledgement had become more than a professional concern. They were a reminder of the connection that could exist between humans and the rest of the galaxy, a bridge of trust and understanding, built not on certainty, but on action. He knew the final challenges were still ahead. The Concorde's scrutiny would not end, and tests would continue. But Elias also knew something fundamental. Humans survived because they acted when others hesitated, because they connected when others withdrew, because they believed when others measured endlessly. And for the first time, the galaxy was beginning to understand this. The final challenge had arrived quietly, like the slow approach of a distant star. Elias Mercer had faced scrutiny, simulations, and cultural tests, but this was different. This test was not just about proving human adaptability or emotional honesty. It was about shaping the perception of humanity across the galaxy. The Concorde had summoned him and Princess Sayakira to the Hall of Consensus, a grand chamber where decisions of consequence were made, and where the representatives of countless systems waited. The room was vast, circular, and suspended above the glow of a nebula. Its walls were transparent, showing swirling gases and distant planets, and panels displayed the faces of delegates who had traveled light years to witness the demonstration. The hum of the station was quiet but steady, as if the palace itself was aware of the importance of this moment. Elias's heart pounded. He had prepared, yes, but he knew that preparation alone could not guarantee success. Humans survived by action, choice, and trust. He had shown that already. Now, he would demonstrate that humanity could inspire, influence, and connect on a galactic scale. Sayakira stood beside him, poised and elegant as ever. Her expression was calm, but Elias could sense her attention on him. They had shared moments of private conversation, small smiles, and quiet understanding. Yet this was public, formal, and immensely significant. He drew in a breath, reminding himself that human courage often began with a single step, even when the outcome was unknown. The head of the Concord, a tall, silver-skinned Aurelian named Valerian, stepped forward. His multiple eyes regarded Elias carefully. "Human Mercer," he said, "you have demonstrated skill, adaptability, and emotional awareness in private sessions. Now, the galaxy wishes to see how these qualities function in practice. You will lead a cooperative initiative involving multiple species to resolve a simulated crisis. Your actions will be observed, recorded, and evaluated." Elias nodded. "I understand. I will do my best." Valerian inclined his head. "That is all we ask." Begin. The simulation began. A holographic system projected a complex scenario: a planet suffering from environmental collapse, multiple species dependent on its resources, and conflicting needs that threatened to ignite tensions. Delegates were positioned around the chamber, each representing their civilization. Aurelians, humans, and others would interact within the simulation, and Elias was expected to guide them. He took a deep breath and addressed the delegates. "We are here not to compete, but to collaborate. Each of your species has strengths. My role is to help coordinate, to suggest methods that allow you to act effectively together. We will succeed not by certainty, but by communication and choice." The simulation challenged them immediately. Resource allocation, unpredictable weather patterns, and cultural misunderstandings caused friction. Delegates hesitated, unsure how to proceed. Elias observed, listening, and spoke carefully. "Trust your instincts.
Listen to one another. Decisions do not need to be perfect. They need to be made with respect and understanding."
He guided the delegates through iterative problem-solving, encouraging dialogue, fostering empathy, and allowing mistakes to be corrected without blame. The scene shifted and evolved dynamically, reflecting their actions. Delegates who had doubted humans' methods began to act more confidently, inspired by Elias's calm presence and willingness to embrace uncertainty. Hours passed. The challenges grew increasingly complex, testing not only problem-solving, but cooperation, patience, and emotional awareness. Delegates faced moral dilemmas, moments of fear, and opportunities for hope. Elias continued to guide them, relying on human intuition, empathy, and the courage to act without complete knowledge. SciFi observed from a nearby platform. She did not intervene, but monitored closely, noting every word, gesture, and decision. Elias caught her eye several times, and in those moments, he felt a quiet reassurance. She had seen his capabilities already, but now, in public, the stakes were higher. During a particularly tense stage of the simulation, two species disagreed sharply over water distribution. Arguments escalated, and tension filled the virtual environment. Elias stepped forward. "We can find a solution if we listen first," he said. He guided each delegate to express needs clearly, without judgment, and to consider the perspective of others. Collaboration is not weakness, it is strength. Slowly, the delegates began to compromise, using creative solutions that combined their knowledge. Human ingenuity, combined with careful listening and empathy, led to a resolution that exceeded expectations. Aurelians, often focused on logic and certainty, began to understand that unpredictability could be an asset when guided by trust and collaboration. As the final challenge concluded, a quiet energy filled the hall. The simulation had ended successfully. Delegates exchanged looks of surprise and approval. Valerian approached Elias and SciFi. "Human Mercer, Princess SciFi, you have shown not only skill, but inspiration. The Concord and the galaxy have observed that humans are capable of cooperation, empathy, and courage beyond expectation. Your people's uniqueness is now recognized as an asset." Elias exhaled, relief washing over him. He had acted as a human, fully and authentically, and the results had resonated. But the moment was not just professional. He turned to SciFi. whose calm expression now carried something warmer.
"You have done well," she said softly. "More than well."
You have reminded us that courage and choice can achieve what certainty alone cannot. Elias smiled. "I could not have done it without you," he said. "Your guidance, your understanding, it made this possible." She inclined her head. "And you have shown me something as well. Humans act with a kind of bravery that we rarely practice. You have reminded me of what it means to choose, even when the outcome is unknown." The hall began to clear as delegates returned to their stations. Elias felt a quiet sense of triumph, not just for himself, but for humanity. They had been underestimated, dismissed, and even ridiculed in some corners of the galaxy. Yet their courage, adaptability, and willingness to act despite uncertainty had won recognition and respect. That evening, as the palace lights dimmed and stars shimmered beyond the transparent walls, Elias walked with Sayakira along the observation terrace. The air was still, filled with the faint hum of the station. "You have changed the way the galaxy sees humans," Sayakira said. "Not by force, not by argument, but by example." Elias looked at her. "We humans survive by acting, by connecting, by choosing. It may seem reckless to others, but it works. It always has." She smiled faintly. "And now, others see it too. You have made the Concord reconsider assumptions that have lasted millennia." They walked in silence for a moment, gazing at the stars. Then Sayakira spoke, her voice quieter, more personal. "And you have spoken words that by people thought impossible. You expressed what many fear to express. You are not only brave, but genuine." Elias felt his heart quicken. He had feared that his words, spoken carelessly months ago, might have been foolish. Yet here she was, acknowledging not just his actions, but his honesty, his humanity. "I only spoke truthfully," he said. "I did not know what would come, but I could not remain silent. That is how humans act." She looked at him fully, and in that moment, Elias realized that the bond they had begun to form, quiet, fragile, yet profound, was no longer accidental. It had grown through shared experience, mutual understanding, and respect. The bridge between human spontaneity and Aurelian precision was now strong enough to carry connection, trust, and perhaps even more. "You have shown me the heart of your people," Sayakira said softly. "And you have shown me courage in a way I did not expect. It is remarkable." Elias felt warmth and pride. "And you have shown me understanding, something humans rarely see from others. You have trusted me, guided me, and accepted me." The stars reflected in her eyes, and for a long moment neither spoke. The quiet was filled with understanding, with connection, with the unspoken acknowledgement of what had passed and what lay ahead. Finally, she spoke again. "I've waited for this, for someone to act with honesty, courage, and heart. I see now that it is possible." "I see it in you." Elias's chest tightened. The galaxy was vast, full of unknowns, challenges, and risks. But in this moment, he felt that humans had carved their place, not through power, or force, or perfection, but through their willingness to act, to connect, and to choose. I am honored," he said quietly, "and grateful that my people's way could be recognized. That I could reach you." Saikira's lips curved into a small, genuine smile. "You have, and perhaps more than you realize." The next days passed with quieter work. Humans were no longer studied merely as curiosities. They were acknowledged as partners, capable of insight, empathy, and courage. Elias continued to guide simulations, interact with delegates, and refine understanding, but now the tone was collaborative, rather than evaluative. Humanity's unique traits were celebrated, not doubted. Elias also spent private moments with Sayakira, walking the observation terraces, discussing stars, life, and the endless possibilities of the galaxy. The conversations were no longer formal. Laughter appeared. Questions about human stories, emotions, and choices filled the air. Trust and understanding had grown, a bridge spanning species, culture, and experience. And in quiet moments, Elias remembered the first words he had spoken. Words that were unplanned, uncertain, and yet transformative. "I love you," she had replied softly. Finally. That reply had carried relief, acknowledgement, and admiration, and it had started a journey that reached far beyond a single declaration. The galaxy had seen human courage, adaptability, and emotional honesty. The Concord had begun to understand that humans could act effectively where certainty was impossible. And Elias had realized something deeper. Humans did not merely survive. They could inspire, connect, and create bridges that spanned worlds. As he and Sayakira stood together on the terrace, gazing at the stars, Elias understood that the story was far from over. The galaxy was vast, full of challenges and unknowns, but humans had shown that they could face uncertainty with courage, empathy, and choice. And perhaps in that courage, there was hope for a future where connections, human, Aurelian, or otherwise, could flourish beyond imagination. He turned to Sayakira. "The galaxy may never fully understand humans," he said, "but perhaps it doesn't need to. It only needs to see what we can do when we act with courage and heart."
She nodded, her gaze steady. "And now it has."
"Because of you." Elias felt a quiet triumph, not just for himself, but for humanity. The bridge was built, strong enough to endure distance, differences, and uncertainty. And in the glow of the distant stars, he knew that both he and the galaxy had begun a journey toward understanding, trust, and perhaps, one day, a universe where courage and choice were valued as highly as logic and certainty. And somewhere, deep within that infinite stretch of stars, Elias realized that humans had shown the galaxy something truly extraordinary. That sometimes, acting when the outcome is unknown can be the most powerful choice of all.